December 19th, 1944. Verdun, France. 16 senior Allied commanders sit crowded inside a freezing stone room. Outside, winter grips the land with brutal force. 50 miles to the north, the Battle of the Bulge is exploding into history. The largest and most desperate battle the United States Army will ever fight. At Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division is surrounded, cut off, and under constant attack. Inside the room, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight David Eisenhower studies the faces around him. The tension is thick. Maps cover the walls. Reports arrive by the minute. Eisenhower finally breaks the silence with a single direct question. "How soon can you attack?" Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery answers first. His voice is measured, calm. 1 week? Others speak next. 10 days, maybe longer. Then George Smith Patton Jr. rises from his chair. "I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours. The room goes silent. No one responds. No one even moves. Omar Bradley stares at Patton in disbelief. To Bradley, it sounds like madness. Patton's entire Third Army is facing east, pushing hard into Germany. To reach Bastogne, Patton would have to pivot 250,000 men, turn them 90 degrees, fight through frozen roads, limited fuel, and brutal winter storms, and then launch an uphill assault straight into concentrated German armor. It sounds impossible. Yet 7 days later, on December 26th, Patton's tanks break through German lines and reach Bastogne. And when they do, Omar Bradley speaks words he will never forget. This is that story. December 18th, 1944. Night. Lieutenant General Omar Nelson Bradley sits inside his headquarters at Luxembourg City, leaning over reconnaissance reports spread across his desk. With each passing hour, his unease grows deeper. For 2 days now, German forces have been surging through the Ardennes forest, a sector Allied intelligence had confidently dismissed as unsuitable for a major offensive. That assumption is now collapsing. The scale of the German attack is staggering. More than 200,000 German troops, supported by nearly 1,000 tanks, have slammed into the lightly defended American 8th Corps sector. Entire units are scattered. Communication lines are shattered. Command structures are breaking apart under pressure. Some American divisions have effectively stopped functioning. Others fight stubbornly, retreating westward step by step. Bradley reaches for the telephone. He calls Lieutenant General George Smith Patton Jr., commander of the United States Third Army to the south. The conversation will later be dramatized in films, but no portrayal will ever capture the true tension of this moment. "Brad, I've got a bridgehead across the Saar," Patton says eagerly. "We're rolling into Germany." Third Army has been hammering German defenses for weeks. At last, Patton has achieved a breakthrough. He is preparing to unleash the fast, sweeping armored thrusts that made his name across France months earlier. "Hold on, George," Bradley interrupts. Bradley explains what is happening to the north. A massive German offensive. Entire American divisions overrun. The front unraveling faster than expected. Bradley needs Patton to immediately divert the 10th Armored Division north to help stabilize the collapsing line. Patton pushes back. Without the 10th Armored Division, he cannot exploit the breakthrough at Saarbrücken. Weeks of brutal fighting would be wasted. Momentum would be lost. But Bradley does not yield. The situation is too dangerous. Eisenhower has ordered all senior commanders to assemble at Verdun by morning for an emergency conference. When the call ends, Patton does something critical. Despite his frustration, He senses this is no limited German strike. His intelligence officer, Colonel Oskar Koch, has been warning for weeks about growing German troop concentrations opposite the Ardennes. Patton had previously dismissed those warnings. His army faced east and south, not north. But Koch's analytical methods have proven reliable before. Patton summons his senior staff. The Germans have launched a major offensive through the Ardennes, he tells them. Eisenhower wants us in Verdun tomorrow. I believe we're going to be ordered to pivot north and strike the German flank. Uneasy glances move around the room. Turning the entire Third Army 90 degrees while remaining combat-ready would be an extraordinary task. Start planning, Patton orders. I want 3 plans, one using 3 divisions, one with 4, one with 6. I want them ready by morning. Some of his officers believe he is being overly optimistic. Surely no one will demand such a massive maneuver on such short notice. But Patton understands something many commanders fail to grasp. In mobile warfare, speed outweighs perfection. The German offensive is a disaster for the Allied units caught in its path. But it also presents opportunity. If Third Army can pivot fast enough, it can slam into the exposed German flank while enemy forces are stretched thin and driving west. Throughout the night, Patton's staff works without pause. Ardennes maps blanket the tables. Road networks are traced again and again. Fuel consumption is recalculated. Movement orders are drafted and redrafted. The logistical challenge is enormous. Moving hundreds of thousands of men, tens of thousands of vehicles, and mountains of supplies through frozen terrain borders on the impossible. At the same time, Bradley faces his own reckoning. As commander of 12th Army Group, ultimate responsibility for the Ardennes sector rests with him. He accepted intelligence assessments labeling the region quiet. He placed inexperienced divisions there to gain combat experience. Those decisions now appear catastrophically wrong. December 19th, 1944. Morning. Verdun, France. The ancient city of Verdun lies under a hard winter sky. Snow clings to rooftops and frozen streets. Inside the Caserne Marceau, a stone barracks dating back generations, the most powerful Allied commanders in Europe gather for an emergency meeting. The conference room is bitterly cold. 16 senior officers sit wrapped in heavy coats and scarves. Their breath fogs the air. Maps of the Western Front cover the walls, marked with arrows, red grease pencil lines, and urgent annotations. Messengers move quietly in and out, delivering updates from a front that seems to be unraveling by the hour. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight David Eisenhower opens the meeting without ceremony. The present situation, he says firmly, is to be regarded as one of opportunity for us, and not disaster. The words hang in the air. To many in the room, they sound almost absurd. German forces have smashed a massive bulge into Allied lines. Casualties are mounting rapidly. Units are scattered across forests and frozen villages. Communications are unreliable. Supply routes are under constant threat. Yet Eisenhower's instinct is deliberate. The German offensive has stripped reserves from other sectors. If the Allies can contain the breakthrough and strike back with speed, they may destroy major enemy formations in the open. Eisenhower outlines the stakes with clarity. The German objective is ambitious: cross the Meuse River, seize Antwerp, and split the Allied armies in half. Bastogne, where 7 vital roads converge, stands directly in the path of that plan. The 101st Airborne Division was rushed into Bastogne at the last possible moment. They arrived only hours before German armor closed the ring around the town. Now they are encircled, fighting alongside remnants of the 10th Armored Division and other scattered units. "We must hold Bastogne," Eisenhower states plainly. If Bastogne falls, German momentum increases dramatically. But holding it requires relief. And soon. Ammunition is running low. Medical supplies are stretched thin. Food shortages are growing by the day. Eisenhower turns toward George Patton. "George," he asks, "how soon can you attack north with a substantial force?" Patton does not hesitate. He steps toward the map. "I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours, he replies evenly. A ripple of disbelief spreads through the room. Some officers exchange glances. A few allow themselves thin smiles. British commanders look openly skeptical. Omar Bradley studies Patton closely, uncertain whether his old friend is bluffing or has finally overreached. "When exactly can you start?" Eisenhower presses. "Morning of December 22nd, Patton answers. 4th Armored Division, 26th Infantry Division, and 80th Infantry Division." Whispers move across the room. Bradley's chief of staff leans in and murmurs, "He's bluffing." He is not. Patton has already committed himself to the 3-division plan. The 4th Armored Division will spearhead the attack. Their mission is clear: drive north from the area around Ardennes, punch through German defenses, and relieve Bastogne. Bradley recognizes the seriousness in Patton's voice. They have known each other since their days at West Point. Patton does not make battlefield promises lightly. Still, the timeline defies conventional military logic. "That's a hell of an order," Bradley says carefully. "We'll carry it out," Patton replies. "The orders are already written. We attack on the 22nd. Bernard Montgomery then outlines his own intentions. His counterattack in the north will not be ready until January 1st. He needs time to assemble forces and reorganize battered units. The contrast is unmistakable. Montgomery asks for weeks. Patton offers days. Eisenhower makes his decision. Patton will strike from the south. Montgomery will prepare his forces in the north. The German Bulge will be attacked from both sides. As the meeting breaks, Bradley pulls Patton aside. "You'd better deliver," Bradley warns quietly. Patton meets his gaze. "I'll be in Bastogne by Christmas." December 20th, 1944. Orders ripple outward from 3rd Army headquarters. Units that had been facing east now receive new instructions. Columns begin turning north. Vehicles clog narrow roads. Convoys stretch for miles across frozen countryside. Snow falls. Ice coats bridges and roadways. Fuel shortages threaten to slow the movement. German aircraft harass supply lines whenever weather permits. Yet the pivot continues. The scale of the maneuver is enormous. Entire corps rotate on frozen roads without collapsing into chaos. Traffic control teams work around the clock. Engineers clear bottlenecks. Officers drive from unit to unit, ensuring orders are understood and followed precisely. Patton personally supervises the movement. He visits command posts, pressures subordinates, and demands speed above all else. "Keep moving," he repeats. "Speed is everything." Meanwhile, at Bastogne, conditions worsen. German artillery pounds the perimeter. Infantry probes test American defenses day and night. The encircled troops dig foxholes into frozen ground. Medical personnel operate without sufficient supplies. Wounded men lie wrapped in blankets, waiting for evacuation that cannot come. German envoys approach the town under a white flag. They deliver a surrender ultimatum. The American response is brief. "Nuts!" The message spreads quickly among the defenders. Morale stiffens. Bastogne will hold, but only if relief arrives in time. December 21st, 1944. The winter storm tightens its grip across the Ardennes. Snow and sleet slash across open ground. Visibility drops to near zero. Roads become sheets of ice. Vehicles slide into ditches. Engines freeze. Men fight exhaustion as much as the enemy. Yet, Third Army continues its turn. Columns that once pointed east now snake northward through narrow villages and frozen forests. Supply trucks grind forward, bumper to bumper. Engineers work non-stop, reinforcing bridges and clearing obstructions under constant threat of German air attack whenever the clouds lift. Patton refuses to slow. He understands the stakes. Every hour lost tightens the noose around Bastogne. Inside his headquarters, reports arrive continuously. Units are delayed. Fuel is short. Some roads are nearly impassable. Patton listens, then presses harder. Find another route. Push through. No excuses. To his staff, the pace feels brutal, but Patton knows hesitation is deadlier than risk. At Bastogne, the situation grows desperate. Artillery fire pounds the American perimeter without pause. German infantry attacks probe weak points, testing defenses in the snow and darkness. Paratroopers of the 101st Airborne fight from foxholes hacked into frozen ground. Ammunition is rationed. Medical supplies are nearly gone. Wounded men are treated in cellars and makeshift aid stations, often without anesthesia. Food is scarce. Sleep is rarer still. Yet discipline holds. The defenders understand their mission. Bastogne is not merely a town. It is the hinge of the German offensive. If they hold, the enemy advance slows. If they fall, the road west opens wide. German commanders grow impatient. They increase pressure, committing more armor and artillery. The encirclement tightens. Messages intercepted by Allied intelligence reveal confidence among German units. They believe relief is impossible in these conditions. They are wrong. On the morning of December 22nd, Third Army begins its attack. The 4th Armored Division leads the assault. Tanks grind forward through snow-covered terrain, engines roaring against the cold. Infantry follows closely behind. Artillery units struggle to keep pace, hauling guns through mud and ice. German resistance is fierce. Roadblocks appear suddenly. Anti-tank guns open fire from concealed positions. Mines detonate beneath advancing vehicles. Progress is slow, measured in yards rather than miles. Still, the attack does not stop. Patton demands constant updates. He urges commanders forward, reinforcing pressure wherever momentum builds. Units rotate through the line to maintain speed. Engineers clear obstacles under fire. The battle becomes a grinding contest of endurance. Meanwhile, Eisenhower monitors developments anxiously. The plan hinges on Patton's speed. If Third Army stalls, Bastogne may fall before relief arrives. Montgomery continues assembling his forces to the north, but his preparations will take time. The southern thrust must succeed. By December 23rd, weather conditions shift. Clouds begin to break. For the first time in days, Allied aircraft take to the skies. Transport planes drop desperately needed supplies into Bastogne. Ammunition, food, and medical equipment rain down under. Parachutes. The defenders cheer as bundles land inside the perimeter. Hope returns, But the town is still surrounded. Patton's spearhead fights on. German units stiffen resistance as they realize what is happening. Armor and infantry redeploy to block the advance. The terrain favors defense. Forests and narrow roads funnel attacking forces into kill zones. Casualties mount. Yet momentum builds inch by inch. On December 24th, Patton visits forward command posts. He speaks briefly with exhausted officers. He studies maps smeared with mud and grease pencil. "We keep pushing," he tells them. Tomorrow. Christmas Day arrives with no pause in the fighting. Snow blankets the battlefield. Explosions echo through frozen valleys. Soldiers on both sides fight without respite, unaware of the holiday beyond the date on their watches. Inside Bastogne, defenders hold their lines. Outside the town, 4th Armored Division inches closer. The gap narrows. December 26, 1944. Morning. The battlefield around Bastogne lies scarred and frozen. Smoke hangs low over shattered trees and ruined vehicles. The sound of artillery echoes in the distance as 4th Armored Division presses forward against stubborn resistance. At the front of the advance, tanks crawl along narrow roads bordered by woods and snowbanks. German anti-tank guns fire from concealed positions. Infantry moves cautiously from cover to cover, clearing pockets of resistance one by one. Progress is slow, but it is relentless. Patton receives word that his lead elements are within striking distance of Bastogne. He understands what this moment represents. Days of impossible movement, brutal fighting, and constant pressure have brought Third Army to the edge of its objective. Now it must break through. Near the village of Eisenhower, German defenses harden. Roadblocks, mines, and dug-in armor attempt to halt the advance. 4th Armored Division commits its remaining strength, pushing tanks forward under fire, while infantry fans out to protect the flanks. Losses are taken. Vehicles burn. Men fall. Still, the attack continues. Shortly after midday, a column from the 4th Armored breaks through the last line of German resistance. A tank crew spots American paratroopers ahead, mud-covered, exhausted, weapons raised in disbelief. The encirclement is broken. The first armored vehicle reaches Bastogne. Cheers erupt among the defenders. Men shout, wave, and slap the sides of passing tanks. Medics rush supplies forward. Wounded soldiers are evacuated for the first time in days. Relief has arrived. Inside 3rd Army headquarters, the news spreads rapidly. Patton allows himself a rare moment of satisfaction. The promise he made at Verdun has been kept. Bradley receives the report soon after. He later recalls the feeling precisely. The mixture of relief, disbelief, and admiration. Against every expectation, Patton has done exactly what he said he would do. The impossible has been made real. Yet the battle is far from over. German forces continue attacking along the Bulge. Bastogne remains under threat. The relief corridor is narrow and vulnerable. Fighting continues day and night as 3rd Army works to widen the opening and secure supply routes. But the momentum has shifted. The German offensive has lost its decisive chance. What was meant to be a breakthrough is now becoming a trap. As January approaches, Allied forces tighten their grip. Montgomery's attack from the north begins. Patton's units continue pressing forward from the south. German formations find themselves increasingly isolated, short on fuel, and under constant pressure. The Battle of the Bulge grinds on, but the outcome is no longer in doubt. For Bradley, the events of December remain etched in memory. He reflects on the meeting at Verdun, on the moment Patton rose and spoke words that sounded reckless, even absurd. "I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours." At the time, Bradley believed it was impossible. Now he knows better. Patton did not merely move an army. He demonstrated what speed, preparation, and unyielding will could accomplish under the worst conditions imaginable. In later years, Bradley would sum it up simply: he had never been so glad to be wrong. With the road to Bastogne finally open, the focus shifts immediately from celebration to survival. The narrow corridor carved by 4th Armored Division is fragile, exposed on both sides, and under constant German pressure. Artillery shells crash onto supply convoys as trucks attempt to move forward. Engineers work under fire to keep the route open, repairing bridges and clearing wreckage as quickly as it appears. German commanders recognize the danger at once. They launch repeated counterattacks, determined to sever the link before it can be strengthened. Infantry assaults strike at night. Armor pushes forward at dawn. Each attempt is beaten back at close range, often in brutal hand-to-hand fighting amid snow-covered fields and shattered villages. Patton orders the corridor widened at all costs. Fresh units are fed into the line. Artillery is brought forward despite the risk. Tanks move hull down behind frozen hedgerows, trading fire at point-blank range. Slowly, yard by yard, the opening expands. Inside Bastogne, the situation stabilizes but remains grim. Supplies arrive, but not in abundance. Medical teams continue working without rest. The wounded are evacuated in waves as roads permit. The defenders of the 101st Airborne remain in position, holding ground they have already paid dearly for. The symbolic importance of Bastogne now rivals its tactical value. Across the Allied front, the story spreads. Patton has arrived. The siege has been broken. Morale rises not only among the troops, but within command headquarters across Europe. For Eisenhower, the relief of Bastogne validates his gamble. For Montgomery, it buys time. For Bradley, it forces a moment of reflection. He considers how close disaster came to becoming irreversible. He recalls the intelligence assessments, the assumptions made about the Ardennes, the confidence that the Germans lacked the strength to strike there. The offensive has exposed every weakness in Allied planning, and yet it has also revealed unexpected strengths. Patton's maneuver becomes the defining example. Not merely the speed of movement, but the foresight. The planning done before the order was ever given. The willingness to prepare for a possibility others dismissed. Bradley recognizes this truth clearly. Patton did not succeed because he was reckless. He succeeded because he was ready. As January advances, Allied forces continue squeezing the German Bulge from north and south. The weather worsens again, grounding aircraft and slowing advances. Fighting settles into a grinding war of attrition. German units begin to run out of fuel. Tanks are abandoned. Artillery falls silent. Prisoners report confusion and collapsing morale. The grand offensive promised by Hitler is bleeding itself dry in the snow. Patton presses relentlessly. He drives his men hard, knowing the enemy cannot recover if pressure is maintained. Attacks continue without pause. Villages change hands repeatedly. Casualties mount on both sides. But the direction of the war is now unmistakable. By mid-January, the Bulge is nearly erased. The German gamble has failed. What was meant to split the Allied armies has instead accelerated Germany's collapse in the West. For Bradley, the memory of Verdun remains vivid. He remembers the cold room, the maps on the walls, the impossible claims spoken with calm certainty. In that moment, he doubted. In the aftermath, he understands. Patton's achievement is not just tactical brilliance. It is a lesson in command, in preparation, in decisiveness, in understanding that war does not wait for perfect conditions. It rewards those who move first. As the fighting drags on into the latter half of January, the battlefield across the Ardennes becomes a landscape of exhaustion. Snow-covered forests are torn apart by shell fire. Villages are reduced to rubble. Roads are clogged with destroyed vehicles and frozen bodies. The momentum that once fueled the German advance has fully evaporated. Allied pressure does not ease. Patton continues driving Third Army forward with relentless urgency. He understands that allowing the enemy time to regroup would be dangerous. Orders emphasize constant contact. Units are rotated only when absolutely necessary. Artillery fires without pause, hammering retreating German positions day and night. German resistance weakens steadily. Fuel shortages cripple armored units. Tanks are abandoned where they stall. Infantry formations are forced to retreat on foot through deep snow with little food or ammunition. Prisoners taken during this period describe confusion, broken command chains, and growing despair. What began as a bold offensive has turned into a desperate struggle for survival. For Eisenhower, the outcome confirms his instinct at Verdun. The situation had been dangerous, but it was never hopeless. The German army expended its final operational reserves in the Ardennes. Those losses cannot be replaced. For Montgomery, the delayed northern counterattack finally moves forward, meeting Third Army's push from the south. The Bulge collapses under pressure from both directions. German forces withdraw toward their original lines, battered and diminished. For Bradley, reflection deepens. He revisits the critical decisions made before December, the intelligence failures, the assumptions accepted without sufficient challenge, the belief that the Ardennes was quiet enough to hold inexperienced divisions. Those errors weigh heavily, but so does the recovery. Bradley recognizes that command is not defined by perfection, but by response. Mistakes are inevitable. What matters is how quickly they are corrected, and whether leaders are willing to act decisively when reality changes. In that regard, Patton's role stands apart. Bradley acknowledges that few commanders would have attempted such a maneuver, let alone succeeded. Fewer still would have prepared in advance for an order that had not yet been given. Patton had done exactly that. The Third Army pivot becomes a case study within Allied command circles. Staff officers analyze it in detail. Traffic control, logistics, command discipline, and planning depth are examined and documented. The lesson is unmistakable. Speed is not chaos when it is planned. As winter drags on, the Western Front stabilizes once more. The Allies regain the initiative permanently. German forces are pushed steadily eastward, never again able to mount a comparable counteroffensive in the West. The road to Germany is open. Yet, for those who lived it, the memory of December remains dominant. The cold, the uncertainty, the moment when everything seemed on the brink, and the moment when one improbable promise changed the course of the battle. In the weeks that follow the collapse of the German offensive, the full significance of what occurred begins to settle across Allied command. The Ardennes is no longer a place of panic, but of reckoning. Reports are compiled. After-action reviews are written. Commanders revisit every hour of those critical December days. The numbers tell a brutal story. German losses are staggering. Tens of thousands of men are killed, wounded, or captured. Hundreds of tanks and vehicles are destroyed or abandoned. Fuel shortages cripple any hope of renewed momentum. The offensive that was meant to turn the tide of the war has instead drained Germany of its last operational strength in the West. Allied losses are heavy as well. American units suffer severe casualties, particularly among inexperienced divisions caught in the opening blows. But unlike the Germans, the Allies possess reserves in men, equipment, and an industrial capacity. Losses can be replaced. Momentum can be sustained. For Eisenhower, the Battle of the Bulge confirms the value of unified command. Despite initial surprise, the Allied response proves flexible and adaptive. Commanders are allowed freedom of action within clear strategic intent. That balance holds under extreme pressure. For Montgomery, the campaign reinforces his belief in deliberate preparation. His northern counterattack unfolds methodically, grinding German forces down as their resources vanish. Though criticized for caution, his approach contributes to the final collapse of the Bulge. For Patton, the campaign becomes inseparable from his reputation. Among soldiers, the story spreads quickly. They speak of the impossible turn, of the frozen roads, of the relentless pace, of the promise made and kept. Patton does not dwell on praise. He turns his attention forward, toward the Rhine and the final drive into Germany. For him, success is not an endpoint, but a responsibility to press harder. For Bradley, however, reflection deepens into personal judgment. He considers Patton not merely as a subordinate, but as a commander whose instincts diverge sharply from conventional caution. Bradley has often served as a counterbalance, restraining Patton's impulses, smoothing his rough edges, preventing excess. Yet, in December, restraint alone would not have been enough. Bradley understands that without Patton's audacity, Bastogne might have fallen. And if Bastogne had fallen, the cost in blood and time could have been far greater. This realization does not come easily. Bradley is a careful man by nature. He values order, planning, and control. But the Ardennes has shown him something undeniable. War sometimes rewards those willing to act before certainty arrives. The lesson stays with him. Years later, reflecting on his career, Bradley will return again and again to that moment at Verdun, to the cold room, to the maps on the wall, to the statement that sounded impossible. I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours. At the time, Bradley believed Patton had gone too far. In hindsight, he knows the truth. Patton had gone exactly far enough. In the aftermath of the Ardennes fighting, the narrative of the campaign begins to settle into history. Journalists, historians, and soldiers alike search for meaning in what unfolded during those frozen weeks. For many, the story centers on Bastogne. For others, it is about the gamble Hitler took and lost. But for those inside Allied headquarters, the deeper lesson lies in decision-making under pressure. The Battle of the Bulge exposes the danger of certainty. Allied intelligence had been confident, too confident. The Ardennes was labeled quiet. German forces were believed incapable of mounting a large-scale offensive. Assumptions hardened into doctrine, and doctrine blinded observation. When the attack came, it came where it was least expected. Yet the response reveals something equally important. The Allied command structure bends without breaking. Authority is centralized, but initiative is decentralized. Eisenhower sets intent. Subordinates execute with flexibility. When reality changes, orders change with it. That adaptability becomes decisive. Patton's actions are the clearest expression of this principle. He does not wait for formal certainty. He anticipates possibility. He prepares quietly, without orders, understanding that preparation itself creates options. When Eisenhower asks the question at Verdun, Patton already knows the answer. That difference between reacting and anticipating defines the outcome. Bradley recognizes this with clarity only after the fact. In the moment, doubt is natural. Skepticism is reasonable. What Patton proposes violates every comfortable assumption about logistics, weather, and control. But war does not reward comfort. The Third Army pivot becomes a permanent fixture in military education. Staff colleges dissect it for decades. Maps are redrawn, timelines analyzed. Every decision is studied not as legend, but as process. How were traffic jams avoided? How was fuel prioritized? How were units kept oriented amid chaos? The answers are unglamorous, but vital. Preparation, discipline, redundancy, and relentless emphasis on speed. None of it happens by chance. As Allied forces pushed deeper into Germany in early 1945, the memory of December travels with them. Confidence grows, not arrogance, but belief. The belief that even surprise can be overcome. That initiative can reverse disaster. For the soldiers who fought in the snow around Bastogne, the memory is simpler. They remember the cold. They remember the fear. They remember holding on when relief seemed impossible. And they remember the sound of engines approaching through the trees. For Patton, there is no moment of reflection captured in speeches or memoirs at the time. He moves on, already focused on the next objective. The war is not yet won. Speed still matters. For Bradley, the lesson is quieter, but deeper. Leadership is not about being right all the time. It is about knowing when to trust the man willing to move first. As the war in Europe moves toward its final months, the events of December 1944 recede from immediate urgency, but never from memory. Within Allied headquarters, the Ardennes becomes a reference point, a reminder of how quickly certainty can collapse and how rapidly decisive action can restore control. Operational planning adjusts accordingly. Commanders become more cautious in assumptions, more aggressive in contingency planning. Quiet sectors are no longer treated as safe by default. Reserves are positioned with flexibility. Intelligence assessments are questioned more openly. The shock of the German offensive has reshaped Allied thinking. For Eisenhower, the campaign strengthens his conviction that coalition warfare depends on trust. He cannot command every movement personally. He must rely on subordinates to act within intent, not wait for permission when speed is required. That trust, tested under the worst conditions, holds. Patton's performance reinforces Eisenhower's belief that initiative is not a liability. It is a weapon. When used responsibly, it creates opportunity where none appears to exist. Bradley, reflecting privately, recognizes how close he came to misjudging that truth. His instinct was caution. His doubts were logical. But logic alone would not have broken the siege of Bastogne. Only movement could do that. In later interviews, Bradley avoids dramatics. He does not elevate Patton to myth. Instead, he speaks of preparation, of planning before orders arrive, of being mentally ready to act when circumstances shift without warning. The lesson, he insists, applies beyond war. When crisis strikes, Those who have prepared quietly will always move faster than those who wait for clarity. Across Europe, American soldiers push eastward. Rivers are crossed. Cities fall. German resistance continues, but without the coherence it once possessed. The Ardennes was the last gamble, and it failed. Behind the lines, new soldiers arrive. Old units are refitted. Veterans speak of December with a mixture of pride and disbelief. The story spreads, growing sharper with each retelling. A frozen forest, a surrounded town, an army that turned in the snow. Yet among those who lived it, the memory remains grounded in reality. There was nothing inevitable about success. Failure hovered constantly. The margin was thin. If weather had held longer, if fuel had run out, if roads had clogged, any delay might have changed everything. That is what makes the outcome endure. Not that victory was achieved, but that it was achieved against the odds, by choice rather than chance. Patton understood this instinctively. He did not wait for permission to be ready. In the years after the war, the Battle of the Bulge becomes one of the most studied campaigns in modern military history. Maps of the Ardennes hang on classroom walls. Timelines are dissected. Decisions are debated. But beneath the analysis, one moment continues to stand apart. The moment when certainty vanished and resolve replaced it. At Verdun, no one in that room could truly know how events would unfold. The cold, the terrain, the enemy, the limits of men and machines, all argued against speed, against confidence, against promises made in hours instead of weeks. Yet, history does not always favor caution. It favors those who are ready when the moment arrives. Patton's statement was not a gamble spoken on impulse. It was the result of preparation carried out quietly, without approval, without applause. While others waited for confirmation, he prepared for possibility. That distinction mattered. Bradley comes to understand this fully only with time. In retrospect, he recognizes that leadership is not merely the avoidance of risk. It is the acceptance of responsibility when risk is unavoidable. The Ardennes offered no safe choices, only necessary ones. Patton chose movement. Eisenhower chose trust. Bradley chose to support the decision even while doubting it. Together, those choices altered the course of the battle. Bastogne held. The German offensive failed. The Western Front stabilized, and the road into Germany reopened. For the soldiers who fought there, the meaning is simpler. Survival. Relief. The knowledge that they were not abandoned. For commanders, the lesson is enduring. Preparation creates speed. Speed creates opportunity. Opportunity decides outcomes. Years later, Omar Bradley would reflect on that freezing room in Verdun, and the man who stood up and made an impossible promise. He would remember his doubt. He would remember his disbelief, and he would remember how wrong he had been. He had never been so glad to be mistaken.